Soothing story time, spooky tales. The Tower. The creatures of nature had gathered by the Tree of Colours to tell spooky stories. Soon began. The soft mist lingered over the heathers. Some wisps caught the slightest of breezes and moved gently down the slopes of the moor to the darkening damp hollows, to make pools of cloud with the low moor grass and heather rising out. Feet pushed forward into the wisps of mist, flattening the grass and heather and passing on. A line of footprints across a pale landscape. The feet came to a halt. Pip stood still, looking out at the darkening sky. There were no features to show where Pip was. The map was no good here. It would be dark in an hour. The mist seemed to gather towards Pip, sneaking up to Pip's walking boots like a creeping animal. Pip watched the mist for a while, then quickly moved over the uneven ground, jumping and striding along, trying to find some feature, some shelter, squinting out to the horizon. Pip repeated quietly, "I will find somewhere soon. There are people on the moor. I will find someone soon." Pip was meant to be enjoying a holiday, walking on the moor. Pip had been advised to stay within the sight of the village, as it was easy to get lost on the moor. But Pip had said, "I never get lost." Pip was lost. It was getting colder and colder. There was no shelter, and Pip had run out of food, expecting to be back for supper. Well, Pip was not going to be back that day, unless some house or other appeared on the landscape soon. Pip paused. Was it better to stay here and try and make some sort of shelter from the damp heather, or to go on? Pip didn't know, but Pip still believed that the village couldn't be that far away, so strode on. The mist grew thicker. There were strange scuttling noises in the heather, rustling, scratching, slight movements far off. Then nothing, only slow mist. Pip wished the red scarf wasn't still lying on the bed in the room at the hotel in the village. Pip thought of the warm supper and breathed in cold air. The sky grew darker. The strange noises in the heather began again, and they grew louder and closer. Pip walked faster, slipping and stumbling. The mist seemed to Pip to be pouring in towards Pip. A snap of a branch hidden in the shadows made Pip rush forward, hoping and hoping to see a house in the distance, looking for little plumes of smoke from a welcoming fire. Anything at all but there was only mist and more. Pip slipped and fell, scrambled up, and rushed forward again. There was a vague shape in the closing darkness, a rectangular shadow. Pip's boots skidded and crunched over heather to get to the shape. It must be a building, anything, an abandoned barn, anything that was shelter. It grew colder and colder. Layers of mist now hung in the air. Pip pushed through them, desperate not to lose sight of the building. On and on, the building grew larger and larger. Pip thought, nearly there, but the building still grew. Nearly there, the building grew up higher and higher. Finally, Pip could see the base of it, a huge grey tower, straight sides, battlement on top, a massive door that looked tiny by comparison with the rest of it. Pip had studied the map. There was no tower on it, and the map was a large one. Pip tentatively walked towards the tower. No lights were on. The only sounds were the rustling in the heathers. There were no trees around the tower, no path. The heather and the grass grew up against the grey walls. Pip stepped over the last of the misty heather and lifted a hand to knock at the door, but the door creaked open. Pip stood completely still as the mist curled around and crept into the doorway. Then a cold wind blew on Pip's neck, and the door began to creak shut again. Terrified of being locked out on the cold moor, Pip pushed the door back and stepped into the hall. The hall was dark and cold, silent. The mist flowed in round Pip's shoes. Scrabbling in each pocket, Pip eventually found a box of matches and struck one. By the shaking flame, Pip could see the stub of a candle in an ornate holder. Pip moved slowly towards the candle on the mantel over an old fireplace. Pip put a match to the candle, and the flame faintly lit the hall. Stone grey walls with a coating of green, damp walls. The water sparkled in the light from the candle, making a scruffy emerald cave. Pip hesitated, wanting to call out to find another person, but not believing any person living here would be one you'd want to meet. Pip took a few steps forward on the smooth flagstones. The tower must have been used a great deal once. There were grooves on the floor by the front step and on the steps of the stone staircase that led up out of sight. Pip watched the mist roll in the open door, then quickly moved to shut it. The harsh sound of the door's old metal hinges echoed round the stones. Pip cringed and waited for the sound to die away. As it disappeared, the sound was like voices in a distant room. Pip called out, "Hello?" and waited. There was no answer. But somewhere close by, something creaked. Pip lifted the candle to see, but the room was bare. A bare stone floor, bare stone walls, a stone fireplace with some kind of plant growing in the old ashes. The only wood was the door. The sound hadn't come from there, but Pip would have sworn it came from the hall. There was a strange feeling, as if someone was watching. Pip tried to see into the doorways of the hall, but they were all shadows and darkness. Pip took a deep breath that didn't calm in any way and stepped towards the nearest open doorway. There was a long corridor full of open doors, darkness in all but one. One room, right at the end of the corridor, was lit by flickering candlelight. Pip was relieved. "Hello? Hello?" Pip walked along the long corridor to the lit doorway. Then a cold dread crept up Pip's spine. Pip hesitated. "Hello?" Still no answer. Pip gingerly walked up to the doorway and looked in. The room was lit by several large candles. The furniture was that of a sitting room, but all covered in a layer of wet green moss, glinting in the candlelight. The cloth of the chairs showed through in places, and once pale gold was now dark and dirty. The delicate green moss grew on the stone floor. There were no footprints. No one could have walked upon the floor to light the candles. A cold wind from the room passed across Pip's face. Pip wanted one of the candles, but it was several minutes before Pip could go into the room. The floor was soft, the cold breeze still blew. Out of the closed windows there was a faint light from the clouds on the horizon. Pip crept towards the nearest candle. All the candles flickered. Pip froze. The cold breeze in the room became stronger, ruffling Pip's coat and sliding over Pip's neck. Pip felt there was someone else in the room, and that this was their room. But Pip desperately wanted a candle from the room, or the night would be spent in the dark. The candle Pip carried was small, and perhaps had an hour of light left in it. Pip waited, breathing heavily, for whoever it was to appear. But Pip couldn't see anyone. Fear began to claw at Pip's mind. The breeze was growing stronger, and all the candles in the room danced their flames to the whim of the breeze. strange shapes formed in the shadows on the walls. Pip could feel the presence coming closer and jumped across to the nearest candle, grabbed it and ran out of the room. All the candles went out. Pip scrambled along the corridor, holding onto the walls and jumping in terror at the emptiness of each open doorway. Back along the cold, wet walls, slippy and slimy, until Pip came to the open space of the hall and stopped, listening intently. It was quiet. Then a creak, then the distant howl of the wind. Pip searched the pockets of the coat for the matches, found them, tried to light one whilst holding on to the two candles, dropped the box, let out a cry of fear and frustration, and groped round the cold, soft moss of the floor till finally Pip found them again. Pip put the candles on the floor and lit a match. Pip looked down the corridor, but no one was there. No one was in the hall. Just Pip kneeling on the green floor in a small pool of flickering flame. Pip lit both candles, wanting the reassurance of light. Pip tried to believe there was nothing wrong really, and that this cold tower must just be draughty. But someone had lit the candles in that rotting room. That was not right. Pip summoned up some courage, put the box of matches back in a pocket, picked up both candles, and decided to find the person who had lit the candles. A high screech of wind whipped downstairs, and every door on the ground floor smashed shut. Pip ran for the front door, grabbed at the handle, but the handle wouldn't turn. The door wouldn't open no matter how much Pip twisted it, kicked it and pulled. The screeching wind abruptly stopped. The hall became still. Then the front door began to creak. It moved like it was twisting and stretching. Pip bolted across the hall and up the stairs, turning the corner, slipping and grabbing onto the banister, expecting to find the next floor, but the stairs carried on up and up and up. There was only blank walls and a staircase that wouldn't end. The creaking of the front door echoed up, and Pip kept climbing the stairs in the flickering candlelight. Here too, moss covered the walls, and wet grey stone shone out between the green patches. Up higher and higher Pip climbed. The creaking faded away. The air was still. There was only Pip's breathing and footsteps. Finally, at the very top of the stairs, there was a door. The door was shut. Pip could see a light shining out from under the gap in the door. Candlelight. Pip stood, still breathing heavily, trying to summon the courage to open the door, when Pip's candles went out. There was no breeze. They just went out. The only light in the stairwell was from under the door. Pip couldn't go to the door, but instead fumbled for the matches. Pip found them, trying to light a match, but there wasn't a spark. Pip tried with a different match, and another, and another. Not one spark. Pip stood forlorn in the darkness, not wanting to go to the door. Then Pip heard a footstep echoing up the stairwell from below. Then another. Then another. Pip reached out for the door and stepped forward, finding the handle, turning it, opening the door, looking at an empty room lit by flickering light, though there were no candles in it. The floor and walls were bare, not one scrap of furniture. Entirely empty, save for another door opposite. The footsteps grew louder behind Pip. Pip came cringingly into the room and shut the door. Quickly crossed the room to the other door, turned the handle and opened the door out to the night air. Pip looked out at the almost black landscape. The moon appeared from behind racing clouds. Pip looked down at the barren moor. It was so far down. Pip was stories and stories above the ground. The wind screeched round Pip. Then the light in the room went out. Pip was shoved out of the door, falling and falling down towards the moor. All went dark. Pip awoke, wet and cold, in a patch of heather. Turning to see the tower, Pip found there was no tower there, no sign of it anywhere, just the moor in the morning light. With difficulty, Pip stood up and saw with such relief the plumes of smoke from the chimneys of cottages. Pip took a step forward towards the cottages and stood on something hard. Pip bent down and picked up 2 candlesticks, one small and ornate, one large and heavy. The end.